What is going on, everyone? It is me, the Lone Vault Wanderer, here with a video on Zelda Breath of the Wild, and also the Zelda franchise as a whole. The question for today's video is, do you think Zelda should stay as an open world style game, or do you think it should go back and forth between being open world and also the traditional gated, closed style dungeon progression that it used to be back in the day? Let me know. So, as I'm sure most of you know, and I fucking tweet about it enough, so I'm sure you all do, I've been playing a lot of Zelda Breath of the Wild on my Nintendo Switch. It's an absolutely phenomenal game, to be honest, and I've put about 60 hours into it, which for me, because I have a full-time job, managing a relationship, and also trying to work on my YouTube channel, 60 hours is a lot for me, right? And I can't remember the last game, to be honest, maybe since Fallout 4, that I've really been able to sink that many hours into a game. And it really speaks highly of just how great of a game Breath of the Wild really is. And I'm able to put so many hours into it because it's an open world game, because there's so much to do, because there are so many things to discover and to find out and to tinker with. Like right now, I'm going through upgrading all my armor, so I have to kill a bunch of Lionels to upgrade my barbarian armor. There was another patch where I was just looking for all the shrines. There was another patch where I was just looking for all the towers. There was another patch where I was just looking at completing all the side quests. There was another time where I just wanted to get all the armors in the game. Like, there's literally always something to preoccupy your time. And I just finished the third boss, or the third dungeon, if you will, in the game. And I still have so much to go, right? Like, I don't think I'm ever going to finish Breath of the Wild from the top to bottom. There's just so much to do, and still stuff that I'm finding out about as I play this game. Like, I just found out that as you're fighting a Lionel, you can use the stasis move to pause it in time and then keep attacking it, and it's a great way to take down Lionels. I just fucking discovered that because I just thought, you know what, let's try using this rune on the Lionel, and it worked. So the point is, it's a phenomenal game. I'm having an absolute blast with it. It's probably going to be my game of the year. Actually, I think it's pretty much a shoe-in for my own game of the year, and I'm sure many other people's games of the year. But there was a recent article on IGN about Zelda Breath of the Wild, and IGN was talking to IG Enuma, who suggested that The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild's open world structure will become the basis for the series design moving forward. And the article says the following. Well, actually, the interview was conducted with Famitsu, so I apologize for that. But the article says, in an interview with Famitsu, translated by IGN Japan, thank you IGN Japan, the Zelda series producer was asked whether the franchise would retain the open-air concept used in Breath of the Wild, or would return to its traditional gated dungeon progression. Quote, "From now on," Enuma explained, "this will probably be the standard form. However, eventually that in itself could become seen as Zelda as usual, and we would start to hear opinions this way and that way. This has always been the case, and the result of what we have made is Zelda." Enuma's point is that dungeon progression itself was once considered a new idea, but became seen as the expected style over time, which makes the latest game feel new by comparison. So I completely, wholeheartedly agree with Enuma here, in that you don't want to stick with the exact same game design for a franchise for every single iteration moving forward, especially with one like Zelda. I know that the reason that I fell in love with Zelda in the past through Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, etc., again, as IGN mentioned, it's that closed-style dungeon progression of those games. That's just what we all came to know and love Zelda to be. That's what most Zelda fans really started with. So you don't want to say, you know what, we're never going to go back to that design again. Even though Breath of the Wild as an open world game is completely phenomenal, like I will speak so highly of this game every day, and I would debate anyone that said this was a bad game. And primarily, yes, it is because it is open world. It is because you can just go and explore and do what you want and hunt and ride horses. Like, honestly, I could gush all day, I'm going to stop. But yes, the open world aspect of Breath of the Wild is certainly lending to its Game of the Year status, is certainly lending to it being an absolutely incredible game that I'm able to sink 60 hours into, and that many other people I've seen on my friends list on my Nintendo Switch have been able to sink over 100 hours into, sometimes even more than that. But of course, the issue is, with Zelda games moving forward, yeah, the next Zelda game can be open world, yeah, maybe the one after that can be open world, but eventually, like with everything, not only are people going to start to get sick of the exact same game design over and over, people are also going to miss what Zelda used to be about. and that is that closed-style dungeon progression. The reason why Zelda Breath of the Wild is such a breath of fresh air, pardon the pun, is because it is so different from the past Zelda games, is because we've never really experienced a Zelda game that's as open world as this. That's why everyone's so excited and continually is talking positive about this game, because it's done something so different, but it's done it so incredibly well. And because of that, because of the success of this open world style game, just as Anuma said, I have no issues, and I don't think it's a surprise if, at least for the foreseeable future, open world Zelda becomes the standard form. But I am completely and utterly opposed to saying, let's draw a line in the sand right now. Every single Zelda game from now on will be and should be open world, because I do not agree with that in the slightest. And this is someone that is enjoying Breath of the Wild, and especially its open world, to the nth degree. Just because I enjoy an open world game in a particular series does not mean I want every single game in that series to always be open world, if it's not for the right reasons. And the fear that I have is by making Zelda an open world game forever, indefinitely, each and every game that's released afterwards is going to seem less impactful, it's going to seem less fresh, it's going to seem a little bit less exciting because we've experienced it before. I mean, this is the main reason why we have Breath of the Wild as it is now, because obviously Nintendo and the developer wanted to change drastically from what Zelda used to be, and that in part is why it's so successful. But it's not like they just went open world for open world's sake. That was a very specific design decision. And what we don't want, just because this game has been so popular, for them just to continually spit out open world Zelda games, because you're going to drift away from what Zelda used to be about. That kind of traditional gated dungeon progression was prevalent in Ocarina of Time, somewhat prevalent in Majora's Mask. It was the 3-day timeline and you have to complete the same dungeons over and over essentially. Really, that game was based on the side quests, but it wasn't really open world. It was still a very similar style to Ocarina of Time. That's what we grew up on. That's what we love Zelda to be. So of course, if you ask fans, would you like eventually Zelda to go back to that style? Of course most fans are going to say yes, and I want to say yes, let's have that. Let's have the variety, let's have the diversity. We can have our open world Zelda games, we can have our closed style dungeon Zelda games. It doesn't just have to be one thing and that's it. I understand that works well with some games, for example, The Elder Scrolls or with Fallout. Those games are open world games. We know that they are open world games, that's why we fell in love with those games, and we don't want to see them change to something more closed, like a linear narrative game, for example. That would just be much too drastic of a change for hardcore dedicated fans of those franchises. And yes, Zelda Breath of the Wild was arguably a relatively big risk because it changed so drastically from what Zelda games used to be, but they pulled it off miraculously and showed that this series and this franchise has diversity and flexibility in that kind of sense. It can adapt to different game designs and game styles, and that's great. Now let's use both of them. Let's have our closed dungeon, let's have our open world, but don't just stick with one game design, because eventually people are going to get sick of it, and eventually people are going to scream for something else. Don't just stick a line in the sand and say we are always going to do open world games, because that's an arbitrary decision that's made in the spur of the moment just because Breath of the Wild is super successful and is a really good game. Let's mix it up. And again, Anuma agrees with this, right? I mean, he said specifically, eventually that could become seen as Zelda as usual. So he agrees, and I'm just saying I agree too. I was just a bit wary when he said that this would probably be the standard form. What does that mean? Is it going to be the standard form for the next Zelda game, the Zelda game after that, the one after that, for the next 4 or 5 iterations or sequels to Zelda, whatever you want to call them? I hope not. I hope that that's not what standard form refers to. Definitely the next game, maybe the one after that, but thereafter, you're going to want to go back to what Zelda originally was. Or maybe make another drastic change and see if that works. I mean, if you want to take the risk, go for it. Anyways, Wastelanders, let me know what you think in the comments below. And until next time, this has been the Lone Vault Wanderer. Please take care of yourself, and would you kindly keep fighting the good fight.